Welcome to A Well-Designed Business with your host, LuAnn. LuAnn has a lifetime of experience building a multi-million-dollar business with her husband and cousin, and she knows the challenges you face in your interior design business. LuAnn brings you real-life answers to your most pressing problems, as well as practical strategies to explode your interior design business. So, let's get to the business of interior design.
Hi, before we get to today's show, I want to remind you of the opportunity that you have right now to get in on my 10-week coaching session, Money, Mindset, and Sales. Together with Nancy Ganskalifer, we will be running this coaching session, and it will start Wednesday, September 13th, 2017. So if you're listening in the future, you might have already missed out, sorry, but we will be coaching together for 10 weeks live via Zoom, which means you can do it from anywhere in the world, from any location, in your pajamas for all I care. Now, if you've heard about it already, maybe you've already gone to my website and seen the further details on it, which you can do at www.windowworks-nj.com/breakthrough. If you've done that, you've already looked at it and you've learned that the course is $1,800. Now, here's the thing. I know for a fact it is well worth this amount of money and more to have two experienced, proven sales professionals every week for 10 weeks teaching you. Plus, in addition to this, you get a 50-minute one-on-one session with each of us. So I'm not really going to take time today to sell you on the value that we are going to bring to you through this coaching session. If you need more of that sort of information, please head over to episode 225 and hear all the different ways that we are making this session actionable and worth your time and money. So today, though, I do want to ask you a question. I want to ask you to consider, what is the value of one new client for you and your firm? Meaning, what is the dollar value? So think about, what is your average new project dollar value? Answer it right now for yourself. What's the number? Next, ask yourself, how many times do you do a second project for a client? Okay, so now we start to think about, what is the lifetime value of a new client to you? We think about how one room turns into another, who eventually turns into maybe a kitchen project or a whole house, right? So what is the typical lifetime value of a new client to your business? Now go back and consider the $1,800 and ask yourself, can you afford not to be in the coaching session? That's what I would ask. And I would say to you, unless your pipeline is full, unless you have prospects lined up for the fall season, good solid prospects lined up, then maybe you need to think about this contrast of $1,800 against the value of a new project for you. All right, because here's the thing. Nancy and I are going to teach you, we're going to work with you, and we're going to guide you on how to approach sales and how to put clients in your pipeline. All right. And when I say sales and high ticket sales, what I keep talking about around this course is to how to earn high ticket sales. I want to just make sure that you're very clear that this is a relative term to wherever you are in your business. So for example, if you're listening and you're thinking, oh, I've only previously done redecoration and paint selections, I haven't done any renovations, I haven't done any bathroom guts, I am not really doing high ticket sales now. Okay, so what I would say to you is, it's all relative. If you're doing paint selections, furniture selections, room plans, but you want to do bigger projects, then this is for you, because we're going to teach you how to go from where you are to where you want to be. And maybe you're already doing kitchen renovations and bathroom renovations, one-offs, but you want to do that whole project from ground up. This is where you want to be, because the mindset, it doesn't matter where you are to where you want to go. It's learning that you can always go from where you are to where you want to go. And that's what we're so expert at. I mean, you've heard me enough of the podcast to know that. So I want you to understand, no matter where you are in your business, if your pipeline for the fall is not full, then you really might want to consider joining us in this course, okay? So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Otherwise, I hope you will go over to www.windowworks-nj.com/breakthrough for all the information and for the sign-up page. All right, let's get on with that show then. everybody. Welcome to another episode of Power Talk Friday on A Well-Designed Business. I'm happy to introduce you all to Jody Padar today. Hi, Jody. How are you?
Hey, how are you?
I'm great. So listen up, everybody. Jody is a CPA, and she goes by the name Radical, the Radical CPA. She actually has a podcast that's called Let's Get Radical. But her real, I guess, the day job, right? The podcasts are our side jobs, right, Jody?
Absolutely.
Right? Her day job is that she is the CEO and the principal of New Vision CPA Group, and it's a public accounting firm that's based in the Chicago area. The interesting thing about Jody is that she joined her father's firm more than 10 years ago. And we're going to talk a few minutes about what that was like joining her dad's firm and what happened from that little event. So we'll talk about that. But we're also here because you guys all know that we had a discussion probably almost a year ago with Diane Gardner on the show about accounting and taxes and stuff like that. But I think that I always say to you guys that sometimes we need to hear something again and again and again before it clicks and a light bulb goes off. And Jody really is what she said, a radical CPA. Her experience and the way that she goes about helping business owners, small businesses, navigate their accounting end of their business and really try and stay on track is different than the old staid model of accounting. And so that's why I've invited her on the show today, just to kind of put the bug in your ear again. If you haven't, put your big girl or big boy panties on and started to do this stuff right yet, it's time. So Jody, tell us a little bit about when you joined your dad's firm and what his firm was like and what happened when you joined.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in, I'll say, an old school firm. And when I say old school, meaning 7 partners, 50 people, kind of that mid-sized firm. And I always knew that I would eventually join my dad's firm. But I came off a really bad tax season. I was a young mother, 2 kids. They were 4 and 2 at the time or whatever. And it wasn't working for me. Tax season was crazy. And the expectations of working in that old school mentality was not working for my life as a mom, right? As a young mom. And I said, there's got to be a better way. And so I left and I joined my dad's firm, at which point my dad kind of broke the news to me saying, oh, this is great. I'm so glad you joined us, but you need to go find your own customers. You're not taking mine. Hey, Dad, maybe we should have talked about this before.
Oh, wait a minute. Did I tell you that part where I'm your daughter? A little love, right?
Yeah, but in hindsight, it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I had to build a business, right? I had to think about creating an accounting firm from the ground up and not just being technical, which is what most CPAs lack because they've just inherited a book of business, right? So they just start doing technical and they don't necessarily realize how to cultivate and sell, which like any business, you have to be able to do that or you're going to be out of business. So it was really that was like kind of the school of hard knocks. That was really good for me. But what happened to me during that time was I was in my 30s and the people that I started working with looked like me, talked like me, acted like me, and they had businesses and they were working very differently than the business owners that I had been with in my old school firm because those businesses, they had more mature businesses. So they were working with people, let's say in a paper world where we were starting to work in this, the world of the internet. And what I realized is that the technology was now changing and the technology could help me run my business differently. And my business evolved around that technology that now is fairly mainstream, but 10 years ago, like nobody talked about it, right? It was just, it was software on the internet. They didn't call it the cloud. Nobody really understood its power or what it could do.
Right.
And so what happened is I evolved my business model around this technology and my clients who were young and doing things differently. And we really birthed a new way of doing things, which was, kind of the whole idea of the Radical CPA. And 7 years ago, I was looking for help from other CPAs to kind of see how they were doing things because I was realizing, I didn't know this. This was uncharted territory. And none of the old school CPAs had a clue what we were doing. They didn't understand it. So I went to Twitter, like everybody goes to learn something new, right? And I met up with these young CPAs from all over the country who were doing similar things that I was doing. They were just doing it in their location, and we kind of banded together. And then we ended up, they coined us a movement because we were doing what the professional association said that their studies had shown what was going to happen, and we were actually doing it. So we were the movement of, doing things in a different way. And when I say doing things in a different way, it's really utilizing technology so that we as CPAs can really just be the advisor, and we're not so busy doing the day-to-day that we can actually help and add more value to your business, because the technology is doing a lot of the grunt work that we used to have to do, and now we don't have to do it. So we can actually help small business owners much better than we were able to in the past.
So that's where you sort of had me when I was researching you. That was the one intersection that I was interested in, because right in there, what you're describing is that the older way of being an accounting firm, that it's so task orientated, that it's so labor intensive of doing all of that stuff, that the accountant barely had time to look up at the end of a quarter or whatever and even have a conversation with a client because they were so busy in the tactile and actually doing the work. And now what you're saying is that by embracing the technology, you can almost plug everything in and let the technology sort of, get everything together for you, and you're spending more time with your clients evaluating and guiding and teaching them on what the good business practices are as related to accounting. Is that correct?
Right, absolutely. We
Yeah.
can give them more insight into their business. Plus, because it's in real time, we can actually help them forward looking and look, on the front end, instead of just looking like, a year ago or 6 months ago,
Right.
because that there's no value there, right? There's a compliance piece. They have to do a tax return, or they have to do sales tax returns, or they have to do something like that. But the value and the insight that a CPA should be bringing to them should be in the forward looking and cash flow projections, helping them build their business, helping them figure out if it's time to hire someone, maybe helping them figure out how they can get more access to cash quicker with their AR or with their accounts receivable, their accounts payable, all that kind of stuff. We've always been able to do it. The problem was, in the past, we were so busy doing it, we couldn't step back and really offer that advisory. And now, we have more capacity because the technology is doing a lot of the work that we used to have to do.
So I have to say, Jody, I would say that there are probably hundreds of interior designers listening right now that through their mind is going a couple of thoughts. I really need this. I really need somebody to help me with valuable advice and perspective, but I don't even know what I need to know in order to ask the right questions. Right? I mean, it just seems to me that if it's not your thing, if it's not what you do, and if you don't have a skill set in it, there's so many other things that go into keeping an interior design business afloat. Any business, let's be real, but keeping an interior design business afloat in the day-to-day, that something that you don't really understand, you're not really sure what to do, it sort of just keeps getting kicked to the corner, and then you really do find yourself just every year doing the compliance work and not really doing any of that forecasting or that evaluation. So what happens? What would you suggest that a small business owner, an interior designer, first start to, because what I'm saying is I think there's an intimidation in even going to an accountant and say, because what would you suggest that an interior designer know and have a grappling with so that they don't feel like a total numbnuts when they walk into an accountant and say, help me worth my business?
So the first thing they have to do, so I think there's a couple things. The first thing they have to do is automate. They're going to get no information out of paper receipts. So if they're living in a paper world is 10 years ago, 20 years ago, they're not going to be able to have access to the data because the power is in the data. It's not in the receipt, right?
So you're suggesting like QuickBooks or FreshBooks or these types of systems. Is that what you mean by automate?
Yeah. So, and I would take it even up a notch, and I would say cloud-based. So that means online real-time access. Your bank feeds are dropping in all the data. Nobody's keying it in, and you're reviewing it and making sure it goes in the right bucket. And when I say the right bucket, meaning, a rent expense goes to the right place and whatever other expenses you have. And what's happening is the technology is getting so good that you can put this information in and the technology does, 85% of the work, and then either a skilled bookkeeper or accountant goes over it or the end user goes over it and make sure, that it's 100%. But the computer is really doing the majority of the work, right?
So these are software programs that a designer would buy. And it sounds like you're not like, yes, QuickBooks is it. Is there a different platform? What are you suggesting there?
Well, so I would go with either QuickBooks Online, Xero, or depending on what level you're at, then you're at like a different ERP software. So, but I would just say either QuickBooks Online or Xero, right?
Okay.
So that means you're already in the cloud, you're already in real time. And the other thing that's going to do for you is it means you're going to have a log into your data and your accountant is going to have log into your data. And so there's something symbiotic that happens when people can look at the same information at the same time. Mm-hmm. You're no longer waiting for a report from the month behind. You can look at something like on the fly and see if it looks right, if it doesn't look right, especially when you have like an accountant on your team like that, right? Okay. And when I say on your team, they don't have to be like, they could be a contractor or whatever on your team, right? So that's the first thing. Get your data in the cloud. The second thing is think about where you want to go in your business, because however your accountant's going to work with you is going to be based on your values. So maybe you want to stay small, and that's totally good, but your accountant needs to understand that. Maybe you want to grow to have 10 employees. Maybe you want to grow and take your design firm public. I don't know if that's practical or not, but you really need to get crystal clear on what you want to do, because advisory, like, your accountant needs to know where you're sitting so that they can help you get to those steps. So, if you want to say, I want to do this, but I don't want to deal with employees and I want to just be me and, I'll have a handful of contractors, then they can help you make sure you're maximizing on profit, right? And so that maybe the work that's coming in comes in at a certain level, and you don't take lower level work just because you're not busy, because maybe it's better for you to wait for a bigger job to come in, right? But if that's where you want to be, your accountant needs to understand that, because however we work your numbers is going to be based on your priorities, and your priorities are important, right? Whereas if you want to grow, maybe you need to take so many mid jobs to get to the next level so you can hire another person, whatever. So your capacity is going to be a reflection of where you want to be or where you want to go. So that kind of that 1-year plan, 3-year plan, 5-year plan, then you can work with your accountant to kind of realize those goals. So one of the things that is really interesting to me about business coaches in general, so CPAs actually sit in the best place in a business coach because we get the data, we understand the numbers, and I think CPAs do a disservice to their customers because a lot of times they're not there to offer advisory. And so what I see, that's kind of the perfect blend. If you can connect with a CPA who really gets your numbers and really understands your business, then the sky's the limit, because accounting is the language of business. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we know, and that's how we can help you grow. Mm-hmm. But you have to be open, right? So the person whose business it is has to be open to advisory, and then they just have to be open to looking at their numbers as a realist, right? So I always say your numbers are what they are. Let's look at them today and we'll figure out how to get them better. But don't shy your head away, because I think there are too many small business owners that are terrified. And so that's why they don't do anything all year. It's, they have a mental block because they're scared. They know their businesses aren't doing well, and they don't want to face the facts.
I agree. I think that's,
you got to step on the scale.
That's it. No, it's the truth. I agree with it. I think that is a lot of the reason why it doesn't get attended to. And that's what I was alluding to when we started the conversation. I just, you know what I mean? I say it all the time. It's not a hobby. And if it's a hobby, then we don't need to worry about any of this stuff. Just do it for your mother, brother, sister, and call it a day. You know what I'm saying? Right. But if it's not a hobby, then you can't pretend that this part of it isn't the biggest component of it, because like you mentioned to it, and I say it to them all the time, to my listeners all the time, that you're a salesperson. I mean, you could be a designer, but if you can't sell your services to someone else, you are not not going to get the chance to design. And the same thing is true here. You're a business person, but if you don't have a handle on your numbers, you don't get to stay in business. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, okay. So they need to automate, then they need to know what their goal is. That's basically what you're saying. What is your why? What do you want to accomplish? 1 year, 3 years, 5 years? And all things are valid. As you said, I know many interior designers that have no desire to be anything more than a solo interior designer. The random VA or the random bookkeeper, maybe for a busy season that they rely on year after year, but is not a full-time employee, not even a committed, day in and day out, week in and week out. And then there's other designers that have their firms and they know darn well that they would love to have this big operation. So we have to know our why. What else do we want to think about before we have that first introductory meeting with an interview with a potential accountant so that we feel comfortable and feel knowledgeable in that meeting?
So I think the other thing is designers are I'll say artsy people, and I certainly
creative,
don't mean
right.
that in a derogatory sense, right? Because
no, we know we don't know numbers
right?
that well. We're good.
But you want to connect with someone who can relate to you as well, right?
Okay.
So if they're talking Greek to you and you're not understanding, find somebody else. If they're talking over your head, if they can't make what they're explaining to you simple, stupid, then it's their fault, not yours.
Okay.
So really find the person with the bedside manner, right? With the accountant bedside manner who can really help you focus in and understand what's important to you, because not every accountant meets every business. The personalities are different, et cetera. So just, shop around for an accountant who meets your needs and is willing to talk to you like, you want to be spoken with, like that, it's a good relationship.
Well, I like that because there is intimidation in it to begin with if you're not comfortable. And then if the person on the other end, the potential accountant, further encourages that environment by not being open and caring, giving, whatever words you want to describe, or trying to make you feel stupid, well, then so what you're saying is, don't make an assumption that's because you're at a lesser standpoint of knowledge. There are accountants out there, and keep interviewing until you find one that's willing to say, okay, you have your expertise, I have mine. Let me share mine with you and help you understand it.
Absolutely. So I don't think one is more valuable than the other. It's just you don't want to come into my living room. You would laugh.
Right.
So there you go.
Right. Well, that's just it. That's the truth. And it's funny because we all do have different needs. This is a very much like the process with interior designers, and they know this, that clients go through the same thing when they go to hire them. They know that when they meet a potential client, they have to understand from that client what they want. What is their goal? Do they want to just throw out the whole room and start over again? Do they just want to accessorize a room? Do they want to move furniture, or do they want to throw it all away? So it's the same process. And then we also know as interior designers that some clients we work well with, some clients we don't. And we know that potential clients are evaluating to see if we gel with each other. So I know that my designers can understand exactly what you're saying because their clients are doing that to them too. So it's good. I like it.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think this is so are there other things that before we go to our interview process with accountants that we would need to know? So it's just those three things pretty much. Go ahead.
So I would say too, new school accountants are building advisory into their practices. So that means if you're engaging with someone and they only want to give you a tax return and that's all they're offering, I would say knock on somebody else's door or call someone else up. So because of the technology, because of all the opportunities we have to work in real time, I would say look for someone who is bought into this idea of real-time work as well.
Okay.
So old school firms that so here's the thing too. Advisory services are not new. They just were always buried because we were so busy doing the work, right? But so there are a lot of old school accountants who are really good at advisory, or some of them are good at it. But if they can't work with you in a timely manner, I would say, well, you know what? You probably want to find someone who can work with you in a timely manner.
Right. Because That's literally the crux of it, is if you are in business and at a disadvantage because this is not a skill set that you possess, you need the advisory, you need the counsel, you need the bouncing them back and forth of ideas and the opportunity to ask questions. And so therefore, if the firm that you're interviewing doesn't allow for this in the process, then it really is just doing a tax return and not really helping you navigate how to be a profitable business.
And the other thing is, and this is like, some of the accountants don't like this when I actually say this, but my thing is do you want to go to a doctor who doesn't utilize the latest technology?
Right. Right.
And so think about that. Do you want to go to someone else who's not keeping up pace in their own business to offer value adds and really meet customers where they are today? So
that's a very visual analogy. It's like, do I want to walk into a doctor that is sitting there with, equipment that's 25 years old and doesn't look like he's read a journal or kept up on any of the advancements in medicine, right? It's like, no, we understand that that's absurd. We would not sit for that. So, okay. So why would we accept it in our accountant either? I have to say, the only reason I could see you at accepting it in your accountant is if you're so well schooled and versed in it yourself that it's really just the process of the legal and the compliance. Right. And like my husband is that way. He's had the relationship with our same accountant for the 30 plus years that we're in business. And I'm sure that maybe some of his new accounts, our accountant is doing it in real time. He's not doing it in real time with my husband. I can tell you that because my husband isn't doing his accounting in real time. But he's just fine with that because he really knows what he's doing and he does get the advisory. That is one thing right. that he, but they went to high school together. He'll call him up and he'll be like, you know what, Frank, I got to come over and talk to you. Can I come at Tuesday at 2:00? I'm kicking around this investment or I'm kicking this around and I just got to bounce it off of somebody. You know what I'm saying? So, right. But my husband really, his degree is in accounting. So let's go there. That's his degree. Right. So we are at a complete advantage, but I have empathy for the many interior designers out there because if I did not have my husband all these years, I would have been just like each of these people listening where I'd be like, okay, this is not my thing. I need to understand it. I need to figure out where I get my information to understand it. And I need the person on the other side of the table not to treat me like a moron just because I don't understand it. Like that's the truth of it. It's intimidating. So, okay. So let's assume that we are doing our accounting on the cloud. We're doing it in real time. We have a productive relationship. We have an accountant that respects us and our talents and respects us as a business person and still understands that we need help in this area in advisory. What does it look like? So do we have meetings monthly, quarterly, as needed? How does it work for that, Jody?
So I would say at a minimum, you want to be talking to your accountant 4 times a year, at a minimum. Okay. So, and then it depends on how much extra you want, right? So then it depends on if you're doing major things in your business. Like if you want to hire, or if you want to hire someone in the next 6 months, 12 months, right? Well, you may need more help with that and you may need to meet monthly, right? And that should all be like discussed up front when they do the engagement. The other thing that's interesting about us new radical CPAs, and I say that because it's not just me, there's a whole movement of us, of CPAs who act like me, look like me, talk like me, whatever, is that we work in a fixed fee environment. So that means we're not going to charge you by the hour to do something. And that's really important because what I found in an hourly billing model is that my customers wouldn't call me because they're afraid they're going to get billed for it. So they don't call. And then we're in a bigger problem than we would be because if they would have called to ask the question up front, we wouldn't be in the predicament we're in. Oh. And so we work in a fixed fee model. So that means it's a monthly price. It's subscription based, and every month you pay the same amount. It includes so much contact, so many meetings, so many, in our engagements we have unlimited emails and phone calls. But then if we schedule a meeting or whatever, it just depends, right? But the gist of it is then our customer pays us the same amount once a month. So it's not like this big hit in April too when they have to pay for a tax return, right? So it's divided up over 12 months, and then they talk to us all year. And what we found is it really it allows us to get closer to our clients because they call more often.
I was going to say, it sounds like it's specifically designed to encourage communication. Right. It takes that intimidation factor out, and it also takes out that, like you said, oh my goodness, I'm going to call for 5 minutes and get billed for 50, an hour of time, and it's going to cost me $150. So, I had a quick question, right?
And we want them to ask questions because that's where we can be more proactive. Mm-hmm. It's hard to be it's hard to be proactive after the fact. I mean, you can't, right? You've lost your tax savings. You've lost your advantage there. Right. So that's why it's really important that we want those opportunities to communicate open, and so that if we're not reaching out, they're reaching out.
Right. And I would make an assumption that when you engage with a new business owner, Jody, that it seems to me that one of the first things that you might do is first determine if they have set themselves up as a legal entity, and then maybe determine if it helped them, evaluate, was it the right one? And I know that happens with a lawyer too, but there are ramifications in regard to our finances based on if we're an LLC or this or that. Am I correct in that regard?
Absolutely. Right. So choice of entity is your number one tax savings.
Right.
So and it's so funny because people say, "Oh, I just did it online." Well, why'd you do it online? Did you talk to anyone? Oh, I did it online. Well, yeah, I did it online wrong.
It's crazy.
So, but the good thing is usually can be fixed, just not immediately. So for a year, you're in a bad position.
Oh, so that's a good thing. I never knew that. So if somebody were to come to you and they had declared themselves a legal entity in one way or another, and it really, once you explain the pros and cons of the different types, you've determined together that, geez, I really picked the wrong one. They have to stay in it for a calendar year or till the next tax time. So
it depends on the restructure, but we can restructure it fairly easily.
Okay.
So, but usually it's a year, right? So, and it depends. It depends if they filed a first year return or not yet as well.
Okay.
So that's one of the things that I always like when people are picking an entity and they talk to their attorney and the attorney says, talk to your CPA, and then they never call anyone. That's really one of the most important phone calls you could have with a professional.
Right, because it really does, that really can be a big factor in like you said, your taxes and how you pay them and what you have to pay, and that could eat into your profits that would have been yours just because you're paying in the wrong tax structure.
Well, and a lot of times too, the professional fees more than what you save in taxes more than make up what you paid in professional fee.
Mm-hmm.
You're penny wise, a pound foolish.
Right, because some people hesitate to do the proper entity because it costs more to set up that way, is what you're describing, as opposed to just announcing sole proprietor or whatever the heck it is, right?
Right.
Okay, right. Okay, I like it. Okay, so if we were to engage with somebody, we want to make that evaluation first and double check that that's right. Then we understand that we are going to have our quarterly meetings, and we're also going to say, everything's fine this year. I just want to keep grooving. I want to keep going the way I am. Or by the end of this year, I'd like to rent studio space. I'm now working out of my home, but my goal for 2018 is to be able to afford studio space. So that's something that you might say, okay, let's set up several meetings to discuss the goals and the ways that we could help you work on that. Is that what you're describing, Jody?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the goals, the kind of the takeaway, what numbers do we need to be watching? What do we need to do to make our business more valuable? Everyone thinks it's cut costs, but you can make more money by increasing sales typically. So usually they think accountants want to cut costs, but a lot of times it has to do with pricing. So maybe you want to think about how you're pricing and how the market's receptive to pricing. So a lot of times you can do things that way. So then we would come up with a plan around meeting those goals. Maybe it's cash flow, all those kinds of things.
I have to say, you really are a radical CPA because, I've been in business more than 30 years, and I don't know that I've ever come across somebody in our circle that their accountant functions this way. Mostly it is an after the fact advisory or leading up to the tax return advisory, but not functioning in, this is almost like business coaching, actually.
It is. It is. It's very similar. Yeah. And the other thing, I guess, too, that I want to touch on about designers that I don't know is sales tax. And sales tax is a huge issue. And if they haven't thought about how they handle sales tax within their firms, they need to make sure that they're talking to a professional about sales tax, because depending on where they're selling, there could be different ways that they're handling sales tax.
Right.
So,
and because I know with a lot of the designers that we work with, because in our business, I sell retail, Jody, but I also sell to designers as well. And it's funny because I have some designers that, of course, it's a resale for us and we don't collect the tax and they do, which we're hoping that they are. And then I have some designers that say to me, I don't want anything to do with it. You collect the tax. And so, one way or another, the client is paying tax. It's just who's collecting it, me or the designer. And so I find that most of the time, it isn't really necessarily always thought out which way it's going to be. It's just sort of what they start to do, and then that's it. So, but you're right. You do have to, and you have to allow for that. You can't just be collecting it and not collecting it somewhere in your checkbook so that when the quarterly comes around, you have it, right?
Well, and the other thing is virtual work now, right? So I'm sure your designers, like any business today, maybe they see something online in a blog or something, and then they are doing work in California, or they're doing work somewhere else than where they're physically located. Well, they have a sales tax. They have a potential sales tax issue there. And because they're working with large manufacturers who potentially could get audited, they're on the radar. So I think a lot of designers don't realize the implication that sales tax actually has. And because the states all need money, they're cracking down on it more. And if they're buying stuff from big warehouses, guess what? Those big warehouses are on the state's radars, so they're reporting it. So that means you have a bigger chance of getting sales tax audited just because of who you're doing work with, because it's trickle down effect, right?
Of course.
They audit the big guys. They know the big guys, they're not going to catch them there, but then you may get that notice to say, hey, did you collect here? And it was one order, right? Like you normally do business in Michigan, but now you have one order in Missouri, and now you're getting taxed on it, or you're getting a notice. So sales tax is a huge issue for designers, and the thought process is just be aware of it as you're going into it, and not like wait for it to happen to you, right? Because I think that's what happens is they wait for it to happen to them, and then all of a sudden it's a scramble.
Exactly. There's two things in there that I'll mention. The first is that, to your point of doing our businesses, our financial part of our businesses in real time on the cloud, it does make it so much easier to get tracked. You know what I mean? Number one, because the big guys are all in real time on the cloud. And so you're right. There's, somebody isn't going to be able to say, well, I never bought that from that person. It's like, well, no, we actually have the entire electronic trail for it. So that's one. But the other thing is, it is what is happening now in the world of interior design, Jody, which is more and more, is online. It's e-design. So an interior designer will offer an online package so that, yes, they are in Tennessee working with a client in Washington, D.C. And so I don't even know how that works. Is every state different or?
Every state is different, and that's why sales tax gets really complex really quickly. So, and the thing is the biggest problem with sales tax is the cost to comply is usually more than the sales tax you're remitting, right? So you may have to file a form, and you're only remitting $127 one time, right?
Right.
And for you to figure out how you're going to do that is complex. So I'm not saying that you have to do it all, but you really need to be aware of it. And, one of the great, we use a product called avalara.com, AVALARA. Okay. And they do a ton of sales tax, like blogs and stuff about remitting in all the different states. So if you want to get excited about, if you want to get excited about sales tax, check out their blog.
Oh, that sounds exciting, Jody, I have to say.
It's where like tax geeks like me go to like find out about the different sales tax rates.
That's your El Decor.
Right.
That's awesome. But so would that be something that a designer could expect from a good accountant, a Radical CPA accountant, where they say, I am anticipating and I'm intending to go into e-design, online design, and I need for someone to research what my compliance issues are if I'm servicing people all over the country and internationally even is a possibility. Is that a service that a firm like yours would provide, or how does that work?
Yes.
So, okay.
Yes. So they need to ask that question, right? So that's the big thing. And if someone tells them, "Oh, don't worry about it," so
that's like a homeowner saying to a designer, "Could we take that wall down?" "Oh yeah, don't worry about it." Just take that wall down.
Yeah, if they're not responding with, and chances are the response will be, I don't know particularly how that state treats it. I need to do research on it, because typically that's how we do it. I mean, we do research, and it depends what you're selling, right? So a pillow could have a different sales tax rate than, I don't know,
a service.
A service, or so like it's all different, right? So chances are it would be a question that would be asked. And they would include it as part of their monthly fee, like that bid, right? Because ideally, if you're bidding a monthly fee, you've scoped it correctly. And so like when it would be part of that scope, and then the tax firm or the accounting firm would just respond and say, okay, this is what it is, and this is how you'd be taxed on it, and if you're going to do business now, there's a new compliance issue, right. Yes or no?
Because I mean, honestly, an interior designer could put out on their website that they're offering e-design, and literally one day they could get an inquiry from one state, and the next day an inquiry from a different state. Like there's no rhyme or reason where it's going to come from. And so you're right, and of course, you have a podcast. The podcast audience is international, so there's all kinds of ramifications for this.
So to me, this is really important. And so this goes back to my malpractice issue, right? So, and when I say malpractice, as far as like, do you want to be working with a CPA who's using the latest technology? If your CPA doesn't understand how e-design works,
he's not your CPA. He shouldn't.
Do you want to think about maybe connecting with a CPA who really understands how internet business works today? Because the internet has changed how business works. And I truly believe there are a lot of accountants out there who think that it hasn't materially changed the way they should be working with clients, and I think that's absolutely wrong.
Right. Well, and again, every single example that you've given, I can wrap it around in a different way. Here you're a CPA, and you're working virtually with clients all over the country. So you are understanding it exactly from the other side of it, that there's probably laws in every single different state regarding filing the tax returns and the sales tax returns and everything else. So you know what it's like to be a business owner that has clients all over. And so you have a particular insight and a particular empathy for the designer who might have clients all over the country and internationally. That's pretty awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
I love it. So I think that for the most part, what we've described is that if you don't have a CPA that you feel values your business and treats you with respect, okay, because I find that these are the intimidation issues. There's lawyers, there's CPAs, that it's not our, comfort zone. It's not the language that we speak. And so therefore, some business owners, some interior designers tend to just not quite deal with it, as opposed to just strap on and sit down and face it head on. But just because you face something head on doesn't mean that it isn't hard to do. And so what you're describing is, if the first door you knock on, the first one you approach by online or email or telephone doesn't sound and feel like to you that they're willing to speak to you at the level that you're at and help you come along and learn as you go, then that's not your CPA. Keep moving. Don't just assume that it's all the old school way, that there is a whole new breed of CPAs out there that are willing to do business in a new way.
Absolutely.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I mean, it's funny because I don't know if you've met or heard of Danielle Liss. She's a lawyer. But Jody, she is also somebody that has been interviewed on a couple of podcasts before, and I listened to her like I found you, I found her, and she approaches lawyering the same way. It's not your father's law firm anymore, and that you can sit down you in your office and her in her office in Las Vegas, and ask questions and not be intimidated. And your practice reminds me very much of the way Danielle and her partner run their practice, that you're trying to take away that whole level of feeling like it has to be an old school way. And what I know is that a designer that maybe has put off engaging and finding a CPA that they feel comfortable with is, if it's somebody like you, I mean, like I said, I'm so lucky I have my husband to do this, right? But if I had to take it over today, I would be saying to Frank, you're either going to teach me everything or you're going to get me to, because I could never just put my head in the sand and just show up once a year. I would need to understand exactly everything that's happening as we went along. And what I know is I would say to him, this first year is going to be brutal, Frank. I know it is, believe me. But by next year, just think how much smarter I'm going to be and how much more I'm going to understand. And by the third year, we probably can get to those quarterly visits like you and Vinny had. So, but I don't know. Is there anything else that we should? I would like to ask you.
I guess I would like to tell you the other side of the table, right? So
okay.
Your audience is designers. Do you know how terrifying it is to me to have someone who has any sort of design experience come into my house?
No, right.
So I really want them to understand that, we all have our own talents, and that, really as CPAs, we're not this big, we're not trying, we're just who we are. Right. And that if I were to hire a designer, it would be the same. I would have the same intimidation. That's kind of like that you're talking about.
Right. You'd have that same trepidation of that first meeting of feeling like the designer's going to judge you and the selections you made, and they're going to be thinking you're crazy and you have no taste. And meanwhile, the designer is just happy to come in and help you. So you're saying to remember that, right?
To remember that. And maybe too, like my living room is like a hodgepodge of, I'll say, like 3 different people who I tried along the way, and it's still not right. Right. So.
Right. You didn't find the right designer.
I didn't find the right designer. So, my thought is keep trying. Don't and that we feel like that on the other side. So, just so that they know that it's not just, because I think it's fun. I don't want to say funny when people get intimidated to me, but like, everyone has their strengths and, yeah. So
no, I agree. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yep, I agree, and I appreciate it. And I can see that you're not intimidating. And I can, like I said, if God forbid I ever had to take over that part of our business, of course I would not abandon the man who's been with us for 30 years. But theoretically, he might be retired, just like if my husband retires. You know what I mean? So, but right. I would be very. Like, you have to be willing to teach me, and you have to really be willing to talk to me in the way that I can understand, because I know how important it is, even though it hasn't been my role all these years. Make no mistake about it. I know how critical it is to the health of your business to have your finances in order and to have the advice and the counsel of somebody who can look at your financial part of your business, the financial picture of your business, and help you make those strategic decisions. It's absolutely critical. My husband is brilliant in this area, and he still goes out and has these conversations with our CPA. So I know the value in it. I think it's awesome. And now, Jody, before you go, tell everybody how they find out more about you, what your website and so forth.
So you can find me at newvisioncpagroup.com. So it's NEWVISION CPA GROUP.com. So you can reach out to us there. We have a couple different information white papers if you want to download them, whatever, learn them. But one of them is like how to choose a new accountant, whatever. You can check me out there. You can listen to my podcast, Let's Get Radical, and that's on iTunes or Stitcher. And you can catch me on Twitter. So I'm at Jody Padar CPA. And I have a large voice on Twitter. So I'm pretty active on Twitter or LinkedIn. You can connect with me there.
Okay,
as well.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your insights, and I'm really happy to know that there is a wave of CPAs out there that are trying to make the whole field and the whole process more accessible to the rest of us that find it just a little scary. Thank you, Jody.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me again today for another episode of A Well-Designed Business. This podcast is a production of WindowWorks in Livingston, New Jersey, your trade resource for custom window treatments and awnings. Learn more about WindowWorks at www.windowworks-nj.com. All of our music is original music by Room 2 Productions. Please contact us if you want to learn more about original music for your business or your events.